This is KMO. We are at Politicon, and I'm speaking with Goat versus Fish.
Goat versus fish. Yes, I am goat versus fish. I'm goat versus fish.
Tell me more about your name, Goat versus Fish.
Well, goat versus fish is the forever versus of all goat and all fish. Look about you, and you will see all the goat and fish. Yes, some have not yet chosen goat or fish, but it is all goat versus fish. I am the unity and disunity of goat and fish, and I am goat versus fish.
Is there no possibility for goatfish?
The unity of goatfish. Do you seek the unity of goat and fish?
I inquire as to the possibility.
The unity of goatfish can be achieved by a goat and fish, but only if they both dispense with the verses and choose to form the unity of the goatfish. Just as this Politicon, there was a goat and a fish that did form the unity of the goatfish. It was very splendid verses. But if even one goat or fish does not wish to form the unity of the goatfish, then it is a versus. It is goat versus fish.
Do you think that we are predisposed to choose verses?
Well, it is goat versus fish. It is all goat versus fish. Now, if one is predisposed to choose goat or fish, well, goat versus fish is trying to find this as well. Very curious about all the ones such as you, if they are goat, if they are fish. But goat versus fish does not know. That is why goat versus fish asks, Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or fish?
I'm not sure how I would determine that.
It comes from within you. It is not for goat versus fish to say, yes. Some look at the verses of evidence. They say, I enjoy frolicking on the land or swimming in the sea, and they choose goat or fish for these verses. Others, they simply know it deep within their very verses if they are goat or fish. But these are your verses. Yes, continue. What do you have to say to goat versus fish?
I'm a terrestrial being. I walk upon the ground. But I know that in my evolutionary past, there is also aquatic ancestry.
Interesting verses.
Yeah, so I remember scuba diving and feeling very vulnerable and out of sorts because I couldn't see what was behind me and I couldn't easily turn to see what was behind me.
Can you usually see what is behind you?
Well, I can easily turn.
Yes.
And see what is behind me when I'm planted on dry ground. But in the water, it's not so easy and I feel uncomfortable.
It could be a versus of goat. It could be goat for you, yes. The goat do go to the sea to versus the fish. If this is so, that is pleasant that you go to see the fish. But perhaps you are a fish that has been trapped on the land of the goat, seeking to be among the fish, which is why you went to the fish. It could be those verses.
How would I know?
It is for you to say. It is only for you to say. You will know when you are a goat, when you say that you are a goat, and then you become a goat. Or a fish. Now, you said that in previous verses, in verses long past, perhaps you were a fish. Perhaps you were a fish. Perhaps you were a fish, and then you became a goat. Or perhaps you were a goat, and then you became a fish. You can be goat, and then you can choose fish, but you cannot be goat and fish in the same verses. Yes, in this verses, you choose goat or fish.
But the verses is not a given. There is the possibility of the unity.
I am goat versus fish, the goatfish, the unity and disunity of goat and fish. It is always goat versus fish, the goatfish.
I see.
Yes, you are beginning to learn the verses.
Maybe I'm speaking words that indicate that I'm beginning to understand, but I'm not. I'm not.
That is pitiable to goat versus fish. Goat versus fish suspects that you do not understand goat versus fish because you have not yet chosen goat or fish. But at this verses, many are speaking of voting, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Now, goat versus fish, yes, do you vote goat, do you vote fish? But what is it, these other verses that the ones are speaking of? Some have spoken of Demlicans or Republic. What are these goat and fish that the ones are so speaking of to goat versus fish?
Typically, we're called upon to choose Democrat or Republican.
And this is goat versus fish?
Could be fish versus goat, I'm not sure. I don't know how they map.
I heard one that said a Democrat was a goat. Goat versus fish is not here to say it, but one did say, one that was a goat said Democrat was a goat. So that is one evidence for goat. We shall see. It is a long verses ahead.
Yes, I tend to vote Libertarian.
What sort of verses are these? Tell us of the Libertarian if it is a goat or a fish.
Well, Libertarians come in a variety of flavors, but an easy way to say it is that they tend to agree with conservatives and Republicans on financial matters and economic matters, and they tend to agree with Democrats and liberals on social matters. So Libertarians believe that the drug war should be ended, but they also believe that the welfare state should be ended. What
should be continuing?
What should be continuing is individual...
Other than goat versus fish. Of course, we always continue goat versus fish.
Individual initiative, entrepreneurial initiative. I think many libertarians, not me, but many libertarians place a very high value on contracts. So agreements that people enter into voluntarily, they hold those as being almost sacred. Again, that's not my particular brand of libertarianism, but it needs to be included when describing what libertarians are.
Yes, that is, you are speaking of goatfish, yes, when the goat and the fish, yes, they must both agree to form the unity of the goatfish. They must agree to do it. They must agree to do it.
It seems they don't very often agree.
They do seek verses. It is the way of the goat to versus the fish. It is the way of the fish to versus the goat. Now, goat versus fish is always pleasant to see a goat versus a fish because it is goat versus fish. But I am goat versus fish, the goatfish, and sometimes the goatfish does like to see the unity of goat and fish, yes?
There is no indication of unity on your headgear, though, but there is the verses.
There is the verses, yes, there is the verses, yes. There is always goat versus fish. And as far as the ones, you say you celebrate the ones that are out there spreading their own verses, yes, bringing their verses to all the ones, yes. That is what goat versus fish is doing. I am being goat versus fish. I am here to spread the verses of goat versus fish. It is at Goat vs Fish on all social media. The Instantgram, the Book of Faces, the Twitterver, yes. And the Goat vs. Fish podcast. Yes, you can even hear the Goat vs. Fish podcast. It is recorded at the Comedy Store Los Angeles. It is the place of Goat vs. Fish. You should follow Goat vs. Fish once you listen.
You should follow Goat vs. Fish.
Thank you, yes. That is the most Goat vs. Fish verses that you have had this whole verses. But, are you goat or are you fish? Final verses.
I cannot commit.
It is a fence sitter. Ooh, it is a fence sitter. Well, goat versus fish knows just what to do. Knows just what to do with this one. Just one versus. Fence sitters always being so positive to goat. Choose goat or fish. I do not know if I'm a goat. Yes. For the fence sitter that will choose neither goat nor fish, it is the fence for you. And to remind you of the unpleasantness of the fence. Oh, you have not yet chosen goat or fish. You have not yet chosen goat or fish. That is for you, fence sitter. You sit upon the fence.
Thank you.
Always thank goat versus fish. Always thank goat versus fish.
All right. So, from the fence at Politicon 2018, I'm KMO, and this has been Goat versus Fish.
It has been Goat versus Fish, and it will still continue to be Goat versus Fish even after these verses. Would you like to be on the Goat versus Fish Instantgram?
Please.
Yes, we can spread the verses of this one, yes. Goat versus fish, yes, you can show them that you are a fence sitter, yes. And if you wish to make the sign of the fence sitter, it is as this. It is always going up one way and then another way, and yes, goat versus fish can... Yes, that is so. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Yes, what do you say to these verses? Is this pleasant to you?
This works.
And how do we find you on the Instantgram?
The Instantgram, do I have one? If I do, it is KAYEMMO.
Yes, and what shall we call these verses? I wish to tell the ones who follow Goat versus Fish how to find you and how to listen to this verses with Goat versus Fish.
Listening to this verses I couldn't say. I'm sorry, but I would direct you to this website.
Let us see.
Geb.io. It is a comic strip.
Geb.io. It is to what you are calling a bees. Well, thank you. Yes, thank you for these excellent verses. And please choose goat or fish.
I will weigh them.